Good evening.
Hang on, Lee. Good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to Kaizen Central. Very happy to see you all here, and it's an excellent way to spend a cold Thursday evening. I'm actually above zero outside. Is anybody here in serious negative zero territory? No?
-3.
Oh, that's not serious. No, in the news they said that Scotland was like -22 or parts of Scotland yesterday. Anyway, very warm welcome. Steve, hello. Hello, welcome to your first. This is your first,
Yes.
Is it not?
Hello, yes it is. Thank you.
Hello, terrific to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. We're just allowing, as always, a couple of minutes to let people join in. Having said I needed to put a jacket on because it was so cold, I'm not going to take it off because it's quite... Hello, Angela. Evening to you. Hi, Lee. Bob, lovely to see you. Hello, Rachel. You did make it. Fantastic. Roy, great to see you. Rowan. Just in case anybody didn't understand that bit about the programming that we're hoping to do. And I'm going to keep reiterating this because it's I think it's an important part of the future of this exercise, is that we've got terrific subject matter experts with us in this group, and I'd love to exploit it, that expertise, in order to create some programming for fellow members of the manufacturing community. And the first one we're definitely going to go ahead with is advertising, marketing, sales. I mean, these are seriously, certainly the marketing part of it is a very, very important aspect of business that I certainly feel SME manufacturers in particular could do with a little bit of assistance with. And so I've put out a call to action, and people like Ben, Rowan, Mark have answered that. But future programming, expertise programming, we could do. I know that some people have spoken about innovation, management. We could talk about lean. I mean, really, it's down to us as a group to come up with that. So please do, if you spot somebody else in the group who you think shares an interest and expertise, why not get together and say, look, can we perhaps do this? Because I'm going to make the members responsible for the content, if you like. I mean, I'm going to be the front man who gets the Oscar, but you guys are going to do all the hard work. And I think it's going to be a really interesting exercise. Rachel, hi again, Rachel, from Midas Pattern, their company has done a fantastic job on reaching carbon net zero process. And I've suggested to her that maybe she and Richard Hagan from Crystal Doors, who's a passionate advocate of sustainability, might also like to do something around how SMEs can achieve greater efficiency and productivity and competitiveness through carbon net zero sustainability policies in the workplace. And I think it's a great way to deal with this. I know that Bob's just mentioned skills, of course. Yeah, how do we advocate much greater investment of time and money in training in order to keep ahead of the game? So anyway, just letting one or two more people in, and then I'm going to ask Ewan Lloyd Baker to discuss this very exciting venture. I don't know if any of you have heard of a bank that was established, I believe, 18 months or so ago as a sort of concept. It's called Alba. Has behind it some very, very noted entrepreneurs and industrialists, people like Jim McColl, the legend, from Clyde Blowers, and others. And Ewan, who's been a member of Kaizen Central for a few months now, is leading the investment round. And I thought it was a great opportunity perhaps to talk about, number one, what the round is all about, what the bank is all about and why it's different, and for members to reflect on what they see as an optimal way that a bank can operate with SMEs in the manufacturing sector, what SME manufacturers basically would want out of a bank. Maybe to help Ewan reflect that back to the bank. It won't get going for quite a while yet because this funding round is obviously important to get through, and there's few more hurdles to jump. Ewan, I'm taking all the wind out of your sails. Please, let's get going. How did you at Seismic, which is your fund management company, how did you get involved with the Alba Bank?
Well, I mean, sort of long story. Thanks very much, Nick, and good evening, everyone. I suppose long story short, when I sold HT and then got involved with Abingtrans, at the time I had numerous discussions with HM Treasury and with the British Business Bank about trying to set up a sort of a long-term patient capital fund. And they kept on saying to me, well, that sounds really interesting, but you don't basically fit within this particular box. You're not quite the right size for either the funds that we've got to deploy. And you really need to have a fund in order to go and, that we can make an investment into. So long story short, I ended up buying a fund management business. So I own a fund management business now with my brother, which means that we've got, a degree of discretion over what we do and how we do it. Obviously working within the constraints and the confines of being an FCA authorized and approved entity. But that sort of then got me thinking about, well, I've been talking about how do we support this sort of almost circular economy concept. But, if you find capital, which is local capital, and you support local businesses, then they're going to make local investment in the local economy for local people. And it sounds sort of, pretty simple, but it means that you're actually going to try and, grow your own as opposed to, capital is phenomenally easy to disappear and dissipate. But investment in businesses and investment in people actually is something that can create much more the multiplier effect, much more in terms of that long-term investment in long-term future to create some real long-term wealth, not just for the investors, but for the whole economy. And so Jim McColl, someone, back in the Hayward Tyler days, we sort of ploughed in similar furrows. And so I've known him probably for over 10 years. And when I heard that he was looking at broadening out the investor base for, Alba and the Challenger Bank, I thought, well, maybe we can sort of join up and we can use our fund permissions and our ability to open up investment opportunities to, let's say, a broader church of investors. And he clearly is coming at it from the perspective of, well, he's a well-known industrialist, and he's absolutely focused and passionate about, investing in local businesses and not being London-centric. And I think that's the really exciting thing about Alba as, a concept, trying to blend this idea of sort of high touch with high tech. But at the heart of it, you've got a relationship banker, looking after your business, and it's a business which is business backed for businesses. So, a combination of all those things together, I think lots of businesses lots of banks talk about relationship banking, but I think, Alba's really got the potential to sort of break the mold and to shake things up.
And can you perhaps just describe that? Well, that relationship element a bit more, Ewan. I mean, we're talking not too about trying to reestablish a high street bank, but it's neither is it going to be wholly a sort of virtual bank like Starling or Tide or the others.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly there's no substitute for human interaction. And I think even in this age of sort of Zoom and Teams, the fact that it's not quite the same, when you see a business on screen or meet a person on screen, there's no substitute for actually going and physically sort of in effect kicking the tires of a business and walking around the shop floor and going and meeting the employees or meeting the management team. And so I think that sort of pushing the decision making and pushing the involvement with those local businesses to the local bank managers, I think is a key part of what Alba are looking to do. And I think that's really important because, I don't know about the rest of, the assembled, but I'm sure they've all had experiences where you might develop a relationship with a local bank manager as such, but ultimately they have very little opportunity to make any decisions themselves. They tend to get, pushed up to the local regional office or pushed up to head office, which often is, in a different city, in a different county, or potentially in London, which is miles away from where the actual business might be based itself.
They get pushed up to an algorithm these days, don't they?
Well, I think it's one of the challenges. You've got to be able to ultimately make, algorithms are great, but algorithms are based on sort of human experience. So it's sometimes that human experience, there's no substitute for going and meeting people, seeing a business face to face.
Okay, now this investment round that you've launched, Ewan, I think I'd just like, if you, before putting it out to the gang, just describe how this investment round sort of fulfills what you were talking earlier about the sort of circular element of the notion behind Alba, and I described as mutual, but perhaps you'll describe it better.
Well, this investment round, becoming a bank is no mean feat, and I think Alba are one of, I'm going to say maybe a dozen, maybe a couple of dozen that have got to this stage. Over many more that have sort of started and fallen at earlier hurdles. So that they've in effect got to the point now where, of the 5 million that they're looking to raise, 2.2 of that is for a mobilization license, and 2.8 is to build the team out and the platform. And that mobilization is really the next stage with the PRA, the Prudential Regulatory Authority. And on the back of that, you then get regulatory capital, which is where they would go to bigger institutions and raise another £20 million. So this is a sort of stepping stone to getting a full banking license on the back of having, the regulatory capital, which is clearly a bigger raise, but a bigger raise from, let's say, different institutions. The purpose of this round is really to try and broaden it out to the sorts of, let's say, business owners and sorts of business people that ultimately might want to bank with a relationship-focused, high-tech sort of challenger bank like Alba. And that's why, there aren't many of these sort of fintech-type opportunities to, actually for, let's say, the average, self-certified, sophisticated investor or high net worth to actually invest alongside the likes of a Jim McColl and some of the other leading UK entrepreneurs to actually sort of make this happen.
And that's down to the fact that the minimum investment is £1,000, and I think that's interesting because what it does encourage is this notion of business people investing, knowing that ultimately what they're doing is investing in something that's going to invest in businesses like theirs, and that's very appealing. I like that.
Yeah, and I think you could use the argument, well, we've all got a stake in RBS because it's a sort of the majority of it is owned by the taxpayer, but I don't really feel any great affinity to that as a a relationship based bank, whereas something where I feel as though I can own a larger part of it, or at least I've invested in, the early part of the journey, and seeing how that evolves, and therefore, let's say, being a more involved stakeholder, I can get excited about that, and I feel as though I can sort of add something to the mix apart from just making a financial investment.
Okay, well, anybody out there who's got any thoughts about the banking system and whether it's worked for them or let them down, and whether they think this concept of of both hands-on and high-tech kind of bank would appeal to them?
I don't know.
Yeah, go for it, Alec. Good evening.
Evening. Sorry I'm late. Just back from Sheffield. That's an interesting concept, because I think I've said it before on this forum, is that the banking system isn't fit for the modern day living or modern day business, and it's almost like a friendly society, isn't it? So it's like the business bank the government's not creating, isn't it? Is that the concept?
I'm going to say yes. The business bank, which is clearly got a lot of capital to deploy, but it's only deploying that capital into other fund managers to then deploy into individual businesses. Whereas and that it tends to be sort of, let's say, from an equity perspective. Whereas this will be a good old fashioned bank that can look at things from a debt perspective, and look at things based on, let's say, actually understanding the business, as opposed to relying on, whether that particular sector is in favour this particular month or quarter or year. So yes, I would say yes, Alec.
I think I'm old enough to remember when we had a bank manager who used to know your business and make decisions. And then when I left the previous bank we were with, I think one of 63 account managers phoned me up one day, and I said, "And what do you know about my business?" I said, "I've been with the bank longer than you have, substantially longer than you have," and I think that's part of the problem. So how can you have that relationship when everything's done, as Nick said, by computer? Computer says no, computer says yes, and that's the frustration for us. And how do we access that? How do we get that money flowing through to the businesses?
I'm going to interrupt just now to welcome Paul to the conversation, because Paul is head of manufacturing with Santander, and he's just walked into a conversation about banking. So I thought I ought to brief him on what's going on. Paul, I don't know.
A familiar discussion, Nick. I remember the time when you knew your bank manager as well. That was some time ago in some respects. Yeah.
Well, Ewan is heading up Series A funding for Jim McColl's Alba Bank. And we were just talking about what Alba is going to be when it's past its regulatory hurdles, etc., and the licensing, and about the sort of mutual nature of this first round of funding, which has got a minimum of just 1K. So small businesses can start to invest at this level in a bank that one day will maybe serve them, and is definitely geared, according to Jim McColl and the other founders, geared to sort of nurturing the SME community. I don't know whether it says SME community. I'm sure it's more than just manufacturing, but obviously Jim, being a major industrialist, has a huge soft spot for the manufacturing sector. So that Ewan's just been describing all of that and how what the ambitions are. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Paul, just a little bit, and just say, as far as a sort of major bank like Santander goes, when you hear of a challenger bank which has the intention of being sort of a hands-on relationship bank, as well as offering the sort of high-tech facilities that the modern fintech sector can offer. What does Santander think about that? Well, I won't ask you for the bank's position. What's your thought?
Yeah, well, I welcome the new entrants, because I think all of the banks, the support that is needed by the SME community, manufacturers, or the wider community is it's a very important. It's the engine room of our economy, and it needs needs support. And I think some of the banks need to be kept on their toes, and new entrants are very, very welcome coming in. And it's the big banks have had a certain amount of a monopoly on things for quite some time. So it won't do any harm at all to have new entrants coming in, keeping everybody on their toes, hopefully for the benefit of everybody. I think there's a place for the challenger banks. Santander is a big bank internationally, but we're a lot smaller than the big four banks in the UK, but we're still of a fairly big scale. So no, I welcome it. I think fintechs have a lot to offer. I think the disruption that they cause and the changes that we've all had to go through in the last sort of 12 months or so are going to see some fundamental changes in our banking sector over the next few years. And we've got plans to offer some disruptive services as well, and particularly focusing on helping UK SMEs to grow internationally into foreign markets. That's where our USP is focused. So I welcome the competition, and it will be hopefully for the benefit of SMEs.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Alec, you were talking about your experiences. I don't know whether you'd finished your thoughts, because I know Phil wants to have a chat as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what Paul's saying about we're with Santander, Paul, and this time last year, or slightly later, we tried to get a Sybil's loan. We're with the business bank, and we have 3 directors. There was no process in Santander for a company with 3 directors in the business bank to get a Sybil's loan. So I took one of my directors out, so we had 2 directors. We still couldn't get a Sybil's loan because we still had 3 shareholders. We were disqualified on that basis. But because I had one of my directors resign, CreditSafe slashed our credit rating by almost 50%, which meant we almost lost our biggest contract for our consultant client. So in trying to get a loan from Santander, you almost closed down our business. And this is what I mean about the business systems are really not fit for purpose right now. The banking systems are not fit for purpose. I find it quite incredible that situation can arise. And that's why maybe Ewan's got an opportunity here to come in. And as he's saying, it's coming back to judging the business. We've had more money in the bank we've ever had. And yet we almost lost the business because of a series of steps that were outside of our control. It's just crazy. The whole system needs looking at.
At the risk of speculating, I think that the eligibility for the CBILS and for the Beebles was set out by government, not by Santander.
No, but if we'd been with the corporate division, that would have been okay. But we're with the business division, so it wasn't okay. That was the point. So okay. That I have no idea what the rationale behind that was, but that's where we were anyway. So I'll leave it there. So I'm not having a go. I'm just hearing experience.
I can't comment on obviously individual circumstances, so it wouldn't be fair for me to do so on an open call like this.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'd like to move on. I appreciate what you said, Alec, and I'm sure it's a minefield, and I'm sorry you had to go through all that. But let's move on. Phil Kernock, good evening.
Yeah, evening. Hi, Ewan. Thanks for that. Quite interesting where you're going with this. I used to work for ADS, the trade body for the aerospace defence security sector, and left there a few years ago. But they have a program. So I'm interested about emerging technologies. Is that an area SMEs that start up? That ADS had a program that we started called NATEP, called National Aerospace Technology Exploitation Program, which gave SMEs 150,000 to go through the TRL process to get their products to a certain level with engaging with customers. But there are companies that then struggle then to take the next leap up past. They've got a couple of initial customers, but then want to grow that and take that to Europe or to other areas. Is that the kind of area that one of the areas that you're looking at?
Yeah, good evening, Philip. I think, look, just I'm not here, representing Alba Bank and their lending policy and what sorts of businesses they plan to invest in. So, just for the avoidance of doubt, I'm here wearing my sort of seismic fund manager hat, and we're raising money, on
I understand that.
into Alba Bank, but I think just so the short answer is, I don't know what their lending policy is going to be, at the point at which they get their banking license. What I buy into is the fact that, they are looking to base themselves regionally. They're looking to focus very much on that local sort of relationship management approach and pushing the sort of decision making out into that sort of individual office or individual manager's discretion. So I think that's to me is, it shouldn't be refreshing, but that clearly to me is refreshing. I think, the attractive proposition as well is that if you look at their business plan, they're saying that really, even if they capture 3% of the overall sort of UK SME lending market, and we are talking, let's say over the next 10 years, that still equates to, nearly £5 billion worth of lending. So, that's a lot of SMEs and a lot of capital that's being deployed, and they're barely scratching the surface in terms of, that market share. And so, there's always clearly going to be, there's a lot of intransigence with regards, the big banks and let's say sticky customers. But I do think over the next few years, I think there will be a great opportunity for, the likes of an Alba who can take a sort of a fresh approach without some of the legacy issues and legacy systems to I think do some interesting stuff and help support some great businesses on the way.
Look, it just looks like you're moving towards a German model. Germany has a huge amount of very, very small SMEs and very, very localized, very small banks, local towns, villages, banks that invest in their companies in regions. And obviously we've tended to move away from that. So is it moving towards that kind of model? Help it supporting that kind of model?
Well, I think, we've talked about it sort of in these chat forums as well. One of the challenges, and to be fair, I think the reason why the British Business Bank was set up as well is to try and deploy capital, in effect away from London. So local capital, and that's got to be a blend of, everything from, straightforward debt lending to, some of the LEP supporting local venture investing, some of the catapults, etc. So I agree. It's a broad range, but in terms of actually a sort of a day-to-day relationship with a bank that understands your business and understands you as an individual, knows you as a management team. I think that's where the focus for Alba is.
Yeah, great. That's good. Sounds very good.
Anybody got more thoughts on banking, raising finance, etc.? Yeah, Niraj, Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, this is not related to finance, but just the opportunity that challenger banks have got, vis-a-vis the traditional banks. I'll just give you an example. A couple of days ago, I had to make an international transfer, from our business, and this is the first time I was doing so. I took some advice from my CA, chartered accountant, and he said go for MX transfer. So when I went to the website, I had to put in my details, and they said somebody will come back within 48 hours. So it is well past 48 hours, and nobody has contacted me. But then I went to TransferWise, and within 5 minutes, the account was set up, and in 10 minutes, the transfer was done at a rate that was much, much better than anybody else in the market. So means there is room, there is scope, there is potential for challenger banks to come in and disrupt the status quo and be successful. But obviously, regulation environment in UK is very positive for them. So there is, I think, that's what when everyone is talking of Alba, I see there is huge potential.
Thank you.
I just have a quick point. I just think we can't go through today's meeting without mentioning, especially on a manufacturing forum and having Ewan and Paul here, without mentioning two things which are closely related. So Ewan and Paul, you would have heard this week the news about Elon Musk and Tesla investing in crypto and Bitcoin. How far are we from people like Niraj being able to pay payments internationally via Bitcoin? And what are challenger banks doing to accommodate the future of payments?
Wow. Good one.
Well, on a personal level, I made back some losses on
Paul,
Bitcoin this week.
I just have to interrupt you. I do have a stake in not in Bitcoin, in other altcoins, so I have to declare that before.
Well,
you go.
I think I was just going to comment that I did have a stake in Bitcoin. I made back a couple of £100 this week. Actually, I was sitting on some losses. So, in answer to the question about the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, others are available, of course. I think it's challenger banks. I access it through a Revolut account, which is a challenger bank, a fintech. It's not something I think you're going to get on the high street anytime soon. If you look at the performance of that over the last 6 months, it's been interesting to say the least. I'll let you comment from Alba's point of view, but I don't think you'll be seeing that on the high street in normal transactions. Maybe certainly not in the short term, and maybe not in the medium term either. Longer term, I think it's earning some credibility. It's been written off. It's been written off some over the last few years, but it's still there, and it's gaining in popularity. So I wouldn't write it off completely, but not in the short term.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to say, and again, I'm not answering this on behalf of Alba, because you'll have to speak. I'm going to say to them directly with regards to what their view on Bitcoin is. But as a fund manager or a fund manager supporting the Alba fundraise, my focus is on, I'm going to say, supporting and investing in businesses personally that I understand. And if I'm honest, Bitcoin is still a slight anathema. I'm sure you can make lots of good returns in it, but I like engineering and I like manufacturing businesses, and I think they're going to be around for a lot longer still. I still think they'll be adding a lot more value. And therefore, I'm supportive of businesses that are in the manufacturing space, the engineering space, and a bank that supports those types of businesses and other SMEs. Ultimately, we need to create our wealth, by making stuff, or by digging it out of the ground, or by adding value to it. And that's the focus for me as a fund manager, and that's the focus for me getting excited about Alba.
Yeah, talking about digging stuff up, did you hear about the guy the other day who tried to do a deal with his local council because he'd accidentally thrown a hard drive away?
That's in my part of the world, Nick. Yeah.
Is it? The council said no. And he said, "Well, I'll split the money with you. It's worth several million."
125 million, I think, in the latest Bitcoin money.
Oh my God! I mean, can you imagine?
He lost the codes. He lost the codes to the Bitcoin that he owned, actually, and he was paid. I think he was a computer consultant that was paid in Bitcoin a number of years ago. And the value has gone up so much that he was literally sitting on a profit of potentially 125 million. But Newport County Council wouldn't do the deal with him, apparently.
Yeah, that hasn't happened to me for a couple of years now, sitting on that kind of return. So anyway, just like to welcome Julian to the throng. Obviously been on Julia was on another call, but I'm delighted to see you. Julia, I just want to congratulate you. You've bought a business. You've been a long-term investor in NED and chairman of other people's businesses, but now you've gone out and bought your own. What's it all about?
Well, it's a publishing business. I don't know why I'm taking 13 seconds to answer a very simple question that you've asked, Nick. I I spent most of my responsible life running businesses, and then an irresponsible, rather wasteful 20 years of being an angel investor and losing lots of money on other people's businesses. And I thought, I had a sort of turned over a new leaf, literally, in January. It was a New Year resolution to actually get back to running something, the real world, rather than simply investing. And I just got introduced 3 weeks ago to a management buy-in opportunity of a publishing company, and 3 weeks later I bought it last Thursday. I've owned it for a week and I hate it. I hate it. I wake up in the morning and I'm responsible for something that I've sort of managed to shake off for years. It's awful. But yeah, it's a nice.
Don't believe you for a second.
It's a nice business, and I mean, I can share, Nick, that you and I already had a conversation. I mean, it's a very fun thing to be able to, which I will be doing, is going and talking to lots of people and saying, "Come on, there's a book in you," or and alluding to our conversation, Nick, there's a lot that we could do in manufacturing and telling stories of businesses, and there's quite a lot of politics. A lot of political books have been published. I have to say, quite a lot in the media, in the run up to what will be the review of the BBC Charter and things like that. But there's also industrialists and in there, intriguing. So. We're set up, and I suppose open for business for ideas for books, either personal books, or what this company has done quite well up to date is get a group of people, knowledgeable people together, and put what I'm sure there's a popular publishing expression for it, but I would call it a sort of collegiate publication where perhaps 10 really knowledgeable people in a sector are asked to do an essay, and then it's a curated book around a subject. So I'm absolutely open with this group that we might do something, and do it in a combination of print, audio, and with you, Nick, with video, with raising the profile of it. A lot of the stuff that we've been speaking about over all these weeks about regeneration of early stage training and government policy and whatever, this could be a platform for us to do something fun.
Well, that's really great, and I Bob, I love that crowd authoring. Very good. Well, Julian, many congratulations. I wanted to move the conversation on, if I may, because it is National Apprenticeship Week, and I just wanted to also note that when we were talking earlier about the ways we can use the combined expertise, just what you described, Julian, to create some programming for the benefit of SME manufacturers, and we're going to start, as mentioned earlier, with marketing, but clearly skills and training are very important. It is National Apprenticeship Week. I want to pay tribute to Roy Howarth for the recognition he got in The Guardian the other day for being an architect of the National Space Apprenticeship Program, or as he likes to call it, Space Cadet Program. The reason I raise it, I hate ever to be called a doomster and gloomster, but I'm bound to attract that moniker this evening, because when I interviewed Verity Davidge of Make UK about the INCOM training report that came out on Monday and said that the pandemic has knocked apprenticeships for six, well, the fact of the matter is there was a sort of systemic decline in the uptake and offering of apprenticeships, particularly by SMEs. Big companies are doing just fine, but they always will. It's the small companies, that's where we need more and more. And it's all down to the apprenticeship levy. So the big question, does anybody here had experience of the apprenticeship levy? And if so, what was it? And is it fit for purpose? And if you haven't had any experience personally of it, have you got any observations about it? Steve, good evening.
I just remember reading in the BBC, it was quite a few months ago, that there was something like £500 million in the apprenticeship levy that had been collected but hadn't been used at all. And some of the reasoning was given, but that is that it was that this is a fund that is collected by the government. So when the Treasury gets its hands on the money, it's sort of reluctant to part with it. So the basic gist of the article was a stack of money had been collected, of which there was £500 million waiting for people to apply for, but the system for getting it out of the Treasury was so difficult that most sort of SMEs and people who could benefit had just sort of given up, that it was just too difficult. And so sort of my take on that was similar to the Alba Bank, that this is the sort of funding that should be managed locally rather than nationally. So in other words, if your council has £50 million left, you can go knock on their door and create melly hell about them using it. So that's my only observation, apart from working with companies who are saying this is going to be a pain in the butt to pay. That there were some shortcomings of the scheme for being able to get the money out of the Treasury.
Yeah, there are other observations around it as well. Companies have been using it to pay for management degrees, which is not what it was supposed to be paid for, used for. And as you say, Steve, easy going in, hard as hell to get it out. I did a story a couple of years ago, again with Make UK on this, with their education policy person, and he said effectively it's become a tax, and the funds are piling up and people aren't spending them because it's just too much like hard work getting the money out, and SMEs aren't taking on apprentices. The idea is, I think, forgive me, but I think it's payroll over 3 million. You pay you pay a levy fund, and then smaller companies. So it's big companies funding smaller companies, and nothing wrong with that in principle. But it's proved to be an absolute, as you so correctly say, a pain in the butt, Steve. I've also noted that there are companies who very cleverly, and I forget the name of some automotive company in Birmingham. How surprising, it can only be one or two of them. They actually set up their own training center inside they were big enough to pay the levy, but they used it to set up their own internal training center, which to me actually was a very sensible use of the funds. They actually got the money back. Don't quite know how it worked. But anybody else? Roy, as somebody who knows the apprenticeships system very well, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so it is complex to get the money back, and Airbus pay a lot of money in, and we would have to take an awful lot more apprentices than we currently do to recover all of it. So, and it expires after 2 years, so it's in your account for 2 years, and then it goes out of date if you don't use it. One thing we've done locally in the Solent area, we have an apprenticeship hub team that work out, that they're associated with a Solent LEP, and they manage a system whereby companies who don't use their money contribute it to a fund, and then it's offered to SMEs who maybe don't have, don't submit enough money that they can take on too many apprentices, but you can transfer it. So you can transfer up to 25% of your levy funds to other companies, and it's very difficult for individual companies to do unless they've got a very strong relationship. But this apprenticeship hub manages all of that. So I think they've just hit £1 million, which they're redistributing. And I think last year, the last count, they had something like 80 apprentices were on apprenticeships who wouldn't have probably been on apprenticeships had this not have been managed. And it's all absolutely what everybody's been saying. It's managed locally, and then people, feed into it. I'll hand over to Steve.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. Welcome to your first Kaizen Central. Great to have you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to add anything to the people that actually, or the businesses that pay the levy. I've not dealt with any of them directly, but I've certainly dealt with non-levy paying businesses on this. There is still a lack of awareness. I mean, I spoke to a business today that are under the 3 million threshold, and they were unaware of the implications or costs involved. I mean, a business that's under the 3 mil threshold, it costs about £300 to put somebody on one of these apprenticeships now. The real commitment is time and commitment rather than the sort of financial aspect. But I still think there's a real lack of awareness. And also, again, the traditional sort of view of an apprentice is bringing a young person into the business and putting them on one of these dedicated programs, when actually you can put existing employees on them as part of the development program. And again, I think there's a lack of awareness over that as well. So I think it's got to shake some traditional stigmas. And there's a lot going on this week in terms of the apprenticeship week, trying to get that message across. And I think there's a lot of good messaging, but I think a lot of people, SMEs in particular, think it's all directed at levy payers rather than, those under the 3 million threshold where, the real benefits can be seen with it.
I think there's also a resistance in a lot of SMEs, either out of principle or out of financial concerns, because obviously part of the apprenticeship system is that the young people or whoever is the apprentice spends some time at college. That's a whole other ball of wax, whether the colleges are up to providing the training or not. It's just about the time out of work and being paid for it. And one of the reforms that Make UK are pushing for is for that part of the apprentice's pay to be picked up out of the levy, so that actually the apprentice costs the business less and isn't a financial burden for those days when they're not in the workshop. Did I see somebody else put their hand up there, or was that a mirage? Nope. Okay. So any more thoughts on apprenticeships? We've got 10, 12 minutes to go. Or any other issues that people would like to raise? The floor is yours. Yeah, Steve. Hi, Steve.
Okay, I just noticed that there was a call from Make UK to push the Chancellor into providing something or to starting something that was the equivalent of a Marshall Plan. So, in other words, an absolutely massive investment within British industry, similar to the Marshall Plan after the Second World War. So I sort of had a bit of mixed feelings about that, but I just wondered what other people thought. After coming out from the pandemic, it's not quite the same as the Second World War, but it's a serious issue that affects the whole of society that most people have been exposed to. So is it something that people would say, yeah, we'd like to see this? If this puts a % on income tax, then that's it. We would like to go for it. I've got sort of mixed feelings about it. I think it could be incredibly successful, or it could just be a huge transference of funds from the taxpayer to the normal people that use this sort of money. But I don't know. I'd just like to put it out there.
Has anybody got any thoughts on that? And I'll certainly get my two penneth. Surprise, eh? Essentially, I I said at the time when I saw that story, it looks to me very much like it's that's a well-written press release. So it's bound to get headlines and it's bound to get Steve Murphy talking. I just think that it's essentially what they're really asking for is a proper bloody industrial strategy, which we've gone around the houses on plenty of times on this forum. I mean, not just an industrial strategy, but a properly funded one with funds going in the correct areas, i.e. not as in the old days, picking winners and subsidizing failing industries, but putting real money into innovation, R&D, and all of that, and particularly in the areas of sustainability and electric vehicle batteries. And I have to say, in the last few days, I've been doing a few stories just on these little news bites that we do, which are a lot of fun. And it's remarkable quite how much really interesting innovation the government is putting money into. I won't say government, it's government money, but it's being done by, I think, some pretty smart people at places like Innovate UK and UKRIs. So, I think that's really where what they're talking about. My first impression anyway of it. I don't think they're asking anything more than a really properly funded industrial strategy. And that would, does that make sense to you, Steve, or are you thinking that there's a lot more to it? We'll probably find out in March at the budget, but let's have I reflected that properly, do you think?
I think so, yeah. I think it's not really it's more they're asking for it. They've got a martial intent. I think I think the way you've summarized it is true. They a lot of the things that we sort of take for granted nowadays, like silicon chips, the internet, GPS, were basically funded out of things like the American DARPA. Were basically quite massive public investments, not necessarily in Britain, but it was that sort of public investment that generated them and have led to where we are. And I probably think that to get out of the doldrums post-COVID, we will need that sort of massive investment. But I think you're right. All you're really asking the government to do is to do what other countries effectively did in the past, but probably we didn't. But I don't get a feeling there's a huge support behind it.
I think really, I mean, if you zoom out of that whole issue, what it boils down to is a matter of ideology, and it's about whether the state has a role to play in a mixed economy. And the Tories traditionally have said, no, it doesn't. Get the state out of everything. And of course, what we've seen is a lot of private sector companies moving into areas previously managed by the state. And everybody have their own opinions on whether that's worked well or not. But when it comes to our sector, the inclination of Conservatives, particularly the Conservatives in power at the moment, who've been pushed into this very interventionist frame of mind by the pandemic. I wonder what would have happened if the pandemic hadn't come along, what we would have seen. At the moment, they're behaving like the post-war Labour government, but it'd be very interesting to see what they would have done if it hadn't been for this emergency. But by inclination, they don't really agree with intervention. So we'll just, this next phase is going to be fascinating to see what comes out of the budget and so on. Anybody got any thoughts? Sorry, Steve, you want to come back on that?
No, all I was going to say was if you look at the Oxford vaccine, that's something where probably, I don't know, but probably a combination of government and private money has been invested for a long period of time, so that when the prof got the phone call on the Friday night, she was in a position to say, this weekend I'll design the vaccine. So in other words, there have been in biotech and things quite considerable investments, and it's just an extreme example of showing how that combination of public and private investment can come to fruition, but they're more the exception than the rule.
Yeah, as I say, interesting times ahead. Anybody got some opinions on what they would like to see happen? I mean, do you think the states should stay out of industrial strategy, and that the private sector, that private companies can manage all this better on their own? He said,
the space industry is in a bit of a strange situation because the government dived in and bought a £500 million stake in OneWeb, and we're all scratching our heads wondering what the strategy is behind it and how is it all going to work. So my feelings are mixed. It's very nice that we're being supported in that way, but it would really be nice to understand what the expectation is, and that's what's lacking at the moment. So, fine for the government. I've seen the government involvement in Harwell, for instance, the space cluster in Harwell, and that's a really smart way of investing. And they've also got an energy tech and a medical tech cluster there. And that's a really smart way of bringing lots of companies together and generating all sorts of ideas. So supporting that is fine, but I think starting to get involved in industrial level companies or commercial level companies, I'm not so sure I understand why they would want to do that. They would be better supporting other businesses doing it for them.
And perhaps the word I always reach for in a situation like this is enabling, making forward movement possible through, as you say, through clusters and supporting R&D, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, the OneWeb thing is fascinating. It's just so interesting. And I think aren't the satellites going to be made in Florida anyway, or is that manufacturing coming here?
They're made at the moment in Florida, but our UK managing director, Richard Franklin, has already talked publicly about maybe generation 2 might be more UK-based manufacturing.
Yeah, fascinating. OneWeb is supposed to be a... Sorry?
Lee was crossing his fingers. I was agreeing with.
Yeah, OneWeb, I think, is supposed to be some kind of satellite broadband thing that the government wants to turn into a second generation Galileo, and I think they're not even in the same orbit, are they, Roy? And OneWeb's low orbit, I think, and
yeah, you can do lots of different things with them, but again, that's the point: is the technical capability needs to be driven by an overall strategy. So, but yes, the current constellation will be a low Earth orbit internet from the sky arrangement, and it's mainly targeted at areas that don't have fiber broadband, and it's too expensive to put it in. So you could get the equivalent of fiber broadband in very remote areas, which is why the partner is an Indian company, because they've got enormous tracts of land to cover, and feasibly it's a cheap investment for them versus trying to put fiber all over India.
Yeah, I've got my own views on that, because wireless broadband, I don't mean wireless in the house, I mean wireless point-to-point broadband is very efficient. I use it, and I'm in a built-up area. There are vast areas of this country which now got it, and I wrote to the culture minister many years ago, Ed Vasey, I think it was, saying, do you not realize that you could get high-speed broadband to the length and breadth of Britain, all the rural and most remote areas, for a tenth of the money you're giving BT? And I got a stock civil servant reply saying, we're very proud of our relationship with BT. We fully trust them to go and put all that money into launching BT Sport and not providing broadband to anybody at anything like the pace that we told them to. Something like that. I don't think he said quite that. Anyway, listen, it's been wonderful to have you all. Hope you've enjoyed this evening's conversation. Ewan, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Really great to see you. And Julian, congratulations on your new venture. And anybody else who's got new ventures, new ideas, new schemes up their sleeve, don't hesitate to bring them out. We'd love to talk about them and support them and offer ideas, etc., etc. Marketing and advertising people, I'll be in touch with you all either tomorrow or Monday about how we kick off that level of programming. Bob, love to talk to you about, well, I've lost Bob now, where is he? About the doing something around skills and training, etc., etc. And Rachel, if you're up for it, would you mind if we also looked at doing something around sustainability? Not immediately, but in sometime in the next few months. Would you be able to be part of that? Was that a thumbs up? Yeah, it was a thumbs up. That's a good show. Okay, listen, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Wonderful conversation. Really enjoyed having you all, and see you all again same time next week. Cheers for now.
Okay.